I was telling you about the YouTube guy that likes to complain every week. Either we ask too many, either we ask too many questions or we don't ask enough questions. Yeah, he likes to critique and complain every week. And I'm thinking this guy just hates our guts, right? And I was telling you earlier, he sent me an email message. He's like, "Hey, who's on the show this week, fellas?" I was like, "Really?"
Well, there's all types out there, so as long as he enjoys the show.
Yeah, I guess.
I guess people don't understand that, when you're sitting there listening to somebody's account, and we're not hearing it beforehand most of the time, so, we don't really know what's coming. Sometimes you really get engrossed into the encounter, and I've caught myself afterwards thinking, dang, I should have asked this or that, So that's the way it goes sometimes, sometimes we ask more questions, sometimes less. It just depends on how the story strikes us sometimes.
I was telling you earlier today, I have 38 Facebook messages. And by the way, if you send me a Facebook message, I'm working on it, people. I'm working on it. I got several people that are like, "Hey, I just sent you a Facebook message." And I'll read the message, and then 5 messages later, it's like, "Hey, you never responded back. What's the deal?" And then they get
angry. I'm the same way with my emails. Sometimes it depends what's going on. If I'm able to get around to them, or after a day of work, sometimes it's just I'm exhausted and I just don't get around to them sometimes when I should. But folks, I always try to get back to people when they email me something. So just try to have patience with us.
Yeah, have a little patience, people. We're trying.
Should we mention the? It just irritates me, this stuff. MK Davis, people like that. Should we mention that or leave it out?
I didn't get a chance to look on the. I usually go to Bigfoot Evidence for any news or anything like that. And I saw what you're talking about with MK Davis. Man, he will not let the Patterson film go.
I didn't watch the whole thing because it irritated me. I watched a few minutes of it. And in this whole new thing now, of course, since we basically said this stuff was crap, about the massacre and everything, now it's like, well, we don't know who made the Patterson film or when. Give it a rest. We do know who made the Patterson film. It was Roger Patterson, and it was in October 20th, 1967, so we know when it was. Get a life, go find something else to pursue. Beating a dead horse isn't going to get you any further in this subject or further the subject at all.
One thing I will say about MK Davis is he's pretty good with editing audio and video.
Oh, I'm sure he's very good at his trade, yeah.
But it's let the Patterson film go, man. Even if you did bring out something that no one else has seen or heard, no one really cares anymore at this point. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's time to move on and move to the next phase of things in this subject and quit, getting so wrapped up in things, that are that many years ago now. I just had to mention it because it kind of irritated me that, it's one angle, then another angle, then some other bizarre angle, and it's just craziness.
Yeah, he needs to put his efforts into something else.
And there's a lot of people in this, subject that like to imprint their own thinking on things without really, knowing the facts or trying to embellish on the facts, when it's really not necessary. It's just, take it for what it is, black and white, and then move on to the next step.
I'll tell you what, MK Davis, if you're listening, which I'm sure he is, because we have a lot of closet researchers that claim they don't listen, but they do.
Are you telling MK to come out?
Yeah. I'll tell you what.
That's not what I meant now, so,
Focus your attention on Todd Standing. Work on that for a while. Something more.
Yeah, that's right. If you want to expose the hoax, there's an easy one.
Yeah.
You don't suppose him and Dyer are related, do you?
You know what's weird about Todd Standing, which I think throws a lot of people off, is Todd Standing, and I've tried to listen to the Bigfoot North, because I'll try to listen, Bigfoot North, for people who are people who are listening, is Jeff Meldrum and Todd Stanning's radio show. I've tried to listen to it, and I've tried to be objective about listening to it, and try to be fair about listening to it. But every time they have a guest, it's like Todd Stanning tries to lend credibility to himself and not come forth as a hoaxer. And he uses his guests, he uses his Meldrum. You think Meldrum would catch on after a while, but obviously he doesn't. You know, it's like, I don't know. I didn't want to go into it, I guess. I don't know. It's been a long week.
Some things just aren't worth, the mental headache. But, here's my take. If your work is credible, it'll stand on its own merits. If
Right.
it isn't, then you spend all your time trying to convince people it's credible.
Exactly. I think because Todd Stanning comes across more crazy and not so arrogant like Dyer. Dyer reminds me of, like, he could be Tom Biscardi's, like, stepson. Or, like, Tom Biscardi's son. You know what I mean?
I just got kind of a creepy mental there.
He's got the sideshow act down, like Biscardi. You know, Biscardi's kind of a ringmaster, like Dyer wants to be. And Todd Stanning doesn't quite come across that way. I don't know, man. It's been a long week, and I'm pretty tired, so I could go off on a rant for a long time about these guys. But I guess I'll leave it alone, because
I would really love to hear a psychologist's take on some of those people,
Yeah.
So if anyone out there is a psychologist, email me. I'd really want to know about these guys.
Yeah. I guess we'll limit our hate mail, and I'll just leave it alone.
Yeah, maybe we should go ahead and move on to our guest. I'm sure he's waiting. First guest is Wynn. He's a Native American in western Montana who's had an encounter.
Yeah, didn't Wynn have a lot of stories, too? A lot of Native American...
He sent me a link to a story. In fact, it's from our friend Sean's site at Bigfoot Evidence. I'm trying to remember the year it was. I think it was 2008, where a gentleman, another native, was taken by a Sasquatch off his front porch and beat up and carried off, and apparently he escaped, was hospitalized immediately because of his injuries from the creature, and ended up dying from those injuries. And Wynn said that was just a few miles from his home.
From the files of Bigfoot Evidence, this is Real Bigfoot Encounters with Reverend Jeff. This week's story comes from us from an anonymous post from August of 2012. It's no secret that for hundreds of years, Native Americans have had interactions with Sasquatch. They're very familiar with the hairy giant that lives in the wilderness. Throughout Native American North America, Bigfoot is seen as kind of a brother to humans. In Indian culture, the entire natural world, the animals, the plants, the rivers, the stars, it's seen as a family, and Bigfoot is seen as a close relative, their great older brother. A poster from western Montana wrote an incredible account about various events that had happened while living on an Indian reservation. One event describes how a group of men became traumatized after killing a Bigfoot and burying its body. This is that story. So I want to be up front. I live in western Montana. The mountains are real, the wilderness is real, and so are the people. I live on a reservation, and the population of Native American to white and other is about 50-50. My father's a tribal member, and my mother is not. I am therefore a white descendant, and have grown up experiencing both sides of the culture. I've spent time in the rough neighborhoods, and at the white-owned ranches and farms. Both whites and Indians have stories that they tell, and they rarely tell them because they're so paranormal in nature. Let me tell you about something that people don't talk about here. When my father was born, he was conscious. This is something he would never tell a stranger, but I'm telling you what he told me. He remembers being in a waiting room before birth, and surrounded by thousands of babies. Some were deformed, some were sickly, some were black and Asian, and other races. and one of them was covered in hair. It's impossible for me to explain this part better than he could, but basically, he saw the waiting room for souls coming into this particular area of the world, and he was one of the few that were let through. I'm only sharing this detail because as a child, I had dreams about the hairy man and his family before I was ever exposed to the concept of Bigfoot. These dreams were frightening and unexplainable, and only made sense years later when my father finally related this to me. In my opinion, the hairy man is somehow related to this area in a big way in my ancestors. Having been the first to settle this area, they've had extensive experiences with the hairy men that have been buried under generations of secrecy and tight lips. Sasquatch may be part of my genetic memory as well as my father's and our grandfather's. Years later, as a small boy, he was playing in the living room when he and his many brothers, when one of them burst through the door screaming and crying for my grandmother to come out and make him go away. This was the first time the hairy man had reappeared in my father's life. My uncle, also a child at the time, had seen a Sasquatch in the small garden out back, which is tucked next to a small creek. At the time, it was surrounded by trees. The Sasquatch was stealing vegetables, and he ran off after being sighted. Nobody spoke of this event afterwards. Sasquatch was taken for granted back then anyway, and my grandmother, raising a house full of young boys by herself, had no desire to encourage them to panic, which they were. As the years went by, my father reached his early 20s, and stories had been popping up around the reservation about a wild man breaking into houses and scaring children at night. Indian Town it was called, and the downtown area with government housing, etc., is a rough neighborhood that I grew up in myself as a kid. Indian Town was a very tight-lipped place, and people didn't speak about these events to anyone but close relatives. The historic church which Indian Town centers around has had many controversies and disturbing stories. At night in Indian Town, someone very large and smelly had been rummaging through garbage and trashing yards. A couple of houses had been broken into and completely trashed. Food from the cupboards was taken, food that a bear or other wild animal wouldn't have been able to access. People couldn't deduce whether it was a wild animal, an alcoholic or a drug addict, or just kids causing trouble. This carried on for some years when one family in particular started to be visited by hairy men almost every night. They would come home and see the door was left open, their food taken, and the animals were cowering under the tables, and the routine was so familiar that they treated it as common occurrence. Like the family ghost, as my father put it, something that's out there that the family just is afraid to acknowledge. They kept their lips tight, but word got around. People were getting nervous. Everyone started to lock their doors at night, and this was unheard of during the 70s. Dogs were acting cowardly for no apparent reason. The wild man was having free rein. He was getting bold. He started to break into houses during the middle of the day. Children would see him and flip out. Police were called, meetings were held. The town was becoming more and more shaken up by the presence of this unknown intruder. This is when something incredible happened to the one particular family who was frequented by the hairy man. They had become so lax and accepting of the hairy man's presence that one night, while standing on the porch, the father was yanked off clear off of his feet in full view of the entire family. They screamed and huddled together and cried while whatever it was fought with him. Dad was pulled off the porch. The sounds of fighting and screaming, with knowing that your father was powerless against whatever it was, it must have been unspeakably traumatic for the kids. They're now grown up like myself, and I wonder to this day how much this affected their lives. The father was gone for days. Whatever it had taken him was carried him off into the night, and after a struggle on the porch. There was blood on the grass, and the family grabbed neighbors and some men from the community to help recover the father. The men got together and followed the signs of the trails left by whatever it was, drops of blood and signs of something large passing through. They followed this trail all the way to the very creek that my uncle had spotted the Sasquatch at. They followed the creek all night long. When the men returned the next day, they didn't speak a word. The whole group of grown men, not one of them was willing to speak about what happened. They had, however, found the father. They recovered him. He was beaten black and blue all over his entire body, ribs broken, arms and legs broken. The father was in shock, incoherent, and couldn't speak a word. One of my uncles had gone to see the man and his family in the hospital. There was a fair amount of goodwill being shown to the family that they went through this experience. Nobody knew exactly what happened, only the father was close to death and the family was very shaken up. So my uncle stopped by to pay his respects and saw for himself the father laying in the hospital. His eyes were bulging wide. He was trembling constantly. This man had been beaten badly. By something else was wrong with him. He was traumatized. He died that night, and to this day, nobody really knows what grabbed him or what really happened in the woods that night. Even now, the men who went on this recovery mission to save him have kept the stories to themselves. Only a select circle, including my father, remembers these incidents. Almost nobody talks about them. I've shared them with you for whatever it's worth. Those men found what took the father that night. They found the hairy man, and they killed it. They shot it to death with high-powered rifles, and they buried the body. The men who did this feel incredibly guilty. Sasquatch is a matter of fact here. The older generations told us to avoid them and leave them alone. They can most certainly be monsters, and this is one story that corroborates that. Back in the 1970s, there was no desire to be rich and famous for killing a Bigfoot. There were no desires to even talk about Bigfoot. These kind of things were dirty little secrets, especially on reservations. Yes, there were plenty of white kids bumping into Bigfoot and getting in the newspaper, but the Indian community is tight-lipped about this, even still to this day. Hairy Man was a dirty little secret, and I'm glad my dad told me this story. To this day, Bigfoot is still sighted in these surrounding mountain ranges, over a dozen times. One of the latest sightings was less than a quarter mile behind my house. At a nearby man-made lake, a Sasquatch was sighted by a retired elementary school principal, who I knew personally. He related to my grandmother in private, and that's the only reason that I know. I hope this was worth the read. Anonymous. Well, folks, there you have it. Yet another incredible real Bigfoot encounter.
For tonight's show, we have Wynn, who is a Native American from Montana.
Hey, Wynn, how are you?
Not too bad.
Hey, thanks for being on the show. Appreciate it.
Well, Wynn, tell us a little bit about yourself first before we go into things here.
I live on the Sasquatch Reservation in Montana. I don't know if you guys know where that's at.
Yeah, you're near Flathead Lake, right?
Yeah. I'm like 8 miles away from there. I'm half white, half Native American. My mom's full-blood Indian, my dad's white.
Well, now, being Native American, you have a little, maybe a little more knowledge than some of us do about the Sasquatch. So I usually ask people, before we talk about their encounter, what their knowledge of this subject was prior to that time.
Yeah, well, when I was little, I always heard of it. My grandma and them tell us when we were young, playing outside, get in here before Ika gets you. And Ika means monster and Bigfoot at the same time. I've always believed in it, but, never paid attention to it until I was getting older. My first time I ever seen a footprint was me and my little brother. I had been at least 9 or 10. We were up in Emmer's Dam picking apples with my mom, and we jumped out of the back of the truck. And as soon as we jumped out, started walking towards the apples, my little brother looked down and he goes, "Wait and look." And I looked down and there's this big old footprint. And I got scared, so I ran back to the truck and told my mom. And my mom didn't want to look at it, but we got out of there.
Yeah, that's probably a good reason to leave.
Yeah.
So when was the first time you actually saw one of these creatures?
The first one, me and my cousin, we used to work at this slaughterhouse here in Ronan where I live. We both just got out of work. We just got done cleaning. When we get on the road, and this big buck jumps in front of us in the road, and he was a huge buck. And we both wanted to see how actually big he was. So from where the road was, we crossed the road into the field and back to another spot where we know there was a road. So we went back there and was looking for him, didn't see him, and so we turned around back there, and my cousin Dusty, he was shining a spotlight out there, and he just stops really fast, and it's like, "What? What do you see?" And I look over and I see these big red eyes, and it had been at least 9, 10 feet right next to this tree.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, what are those? And I just got a glimpse of him, like maybe 2-3 second look, and he just like peels out of there. Like I flew back into the seat, and I was like, what did you see? What did you see? And he wouldn't talk. He was just floored. And so I started messing around with him, and I just like started like screaming, oh, it's in the back of the truck. And he to the steering wheel and just started screaming. And to this day, I can't get him to say what it was.
He must have got a pretty good look then.
He was driving, and it was on his side. So I'm pretty sure he got a good look at what it was, because I only seen the big red eyes.
What was your opinion of it at the time? What did you think it was?
I didn't know what it was then, because, Bigfoot wasn't that big back in the day.
Sure.
Until I seen mine, and I started getting into Bigfoot pretty good. Then I started reading all these stories, started seeing, like, the FRO and how their eyes were and stuff. Exactly what I've seen. And I was just like, man, that's what I've seen that night. That's what my cousin's seen, and he won't talk about it. I ask him about it all the time, and he won't talk about it.
Wow. It must have jarred him pretty good then.
Yeah. Well, he doesn't go hunting or anything anymore. He never really was a big hunter, but he'd come pick me up and we'd go hunting all day and just cruise around in the woods, and now he don't do that.
Well, that would definitely be an incentive to stay out of the woods.
Yeah, kind of. But
leading up to your sighting, what were you doing up to that time?
I was hunting.
Okay, so tell us what happened.
Well, I was hunting most of the day. I was down by the river bottoms and stuff, and I've seen quite a few bucks, but nothing too big. So I figured I'd go up to North Crow Canyon. I know there's big bucks up there all the time. You just got to catch them at the right time. I was going up there, and at first there's a clear cut that's maybe 200-300 yards long, and that's where you usually catch them. And through there, I started coming to the end of the clear cut, and I was like, all right, well, I'll just speed up a little bit and go up and turn around because it's a dead-end road and see if I can catch them on the way back, because they're running through there all the time. I get about, half a mile going through the woods, and come to this corner. It's about a 90 or about 80, 70-degree corner. I started going around it, and like out of the corner of my eye, I just caught it. I was like, whoa, what? Just kind of looked over, and biggest damn thing I've ever seen. It was like I surprised it coming around that corner. When I looked over and caught it out of the corner of my eye, something in my head clicked. Don't look in the eyes, because I've always heard from other Indians, you look in the eyes, it means death.
Right, I've heard that a number of times.
Yeah, and it just clicked in my head for some reason. And just like that half of a second, just that little bit of a look, I just knew exactly what it was. It was huge. I just started staring down, like, towards the chin and the neck and the chest area. My whole body went, like a numb feeling, like somebody flushed, like I was flushed, and everything went down to my feet.
Right.
Yeah, I'm like almost to where I'd say I was paralyzed. I couldn't move or nothing. When I seen it, it was holding on to this tree about 12 inches around, and its whole hand almost wrapped around it. Like it had to have been like 4 or 5 inches where I could still see his fingertips and around that tree, and the other hand was just sitting there like she was getting ready for a high five, or not a high five, but a low five, like, right. I startled it. And
what did you do then?
I freaked out. I just stepped on it. Then I was like, man, I was pretty nervous. I've been in the woods all my life since I could walk. I knew I had to go up there, and there was only one way out. So I kind of sat up there for a little bit, and I was going to call my brother, and there's no phone service up there. I was pretty scared. I didn't want to come back down, I mean, this thing was huge. It was almost like, I don't know, it was almost like it wasn't real,
Yeah, that's, I'm sure Wes and myself can both attest to that. We've, seen the things ourselves too, and it's just something that most people can't comprehend.
Yeah, it's like it's not real, like kind of like a dream, or it was the weirdest feeling I ever had.
Yeah, it's hard to describe that. It's hard to describe that to people.
Yeah, it's kind of like a fuzzy, blurry feeling or something.
What's funny is I know exactly what you mean when you say that. But it's hard to articulate that feeling to someone else. When you say it, I know exactly what you mean, but it's hard to articulate it to someone else who maybe hasn't had that type of feeling.
I felt like I felt like my body was flushed. I swear I felt like I was maybe 1.5 pounds, heavy. Like I got I got that cold kind of, clammy feeling. Just felt really weird. Felt like everything went into my feet when I seen it.
Yeah, my first sighting, I was about 15 feet away from two of them, and my skin went completely cold. I felt like I drained away, I think it was just the fear, of the moment.
Yeah. Trying to tell people, I didn't tell anybody for like 3 years because I knew nobody would believe me. Like my brothers and them, they just all make fun of me, so I never told anybody. And I was watching that BFRO, and I was like, what the heck with it? I just started telling people what I've seen, and some people believe me, and some people are like, yeah, whatever. I just don't really care anymore.
Well, those of us that have seen the things really shouldn't care what other people think. We're the ones that have seen these things. If they haven't, well, what leg have they got to stand on, really?
Yeah. Well, after, I started telling people about mine, I realized how tight-lipped people are around here about it. I got quite a few people that tell me that they've seen them before.
I think that's true, particularly with, and with Native Americans. I've got a few buddies from Klamath tribe that are like that. I've gotten a few people down there to talk, but for the most part, pretty tight-lipped.
How do the Native Americans feel about Sasquatch on the reservation?
Where I live?
Yeah.
Yeah, they all believe him. They all believe in him. Our elders tell us to leave him alone. Don't go looking for him, because if you go looking for him, you'll end up getting hurt. You leave him alone, he'll leave you alone. And, they're pretty strong when he's out there. And if you go looking for him, you're going to get hurt. And if you see him,
pretty universal.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess it's my Uncle Jim. Yeah, from maybe a mile down the road from where I was, his father and mother lived not too far from there, straight down the road where I seen mine, and they were watching TV one night, and they had one of those sliding doors, and they were watching TV, and his dad said that like there was a little bit of light outside, but whatever stepped in that sliding doorway blackened it out, and he couldn't anything. Yeah. And they had, stuff moved around their yard that, a normal person couldn't pick up. Just a bunch of weird.
You sent me a link to a story of a guy down the road from you where you live who was grabbed off his porch. Did you have personal knowledge about that story?
No, I didn't. After I seen mine, I started getting into Bigfoot pretty big, and, just started listening to different stories and all that. And I come across that. I was like, wow, that's only, a couple miles from, my town. I mean, it's, there was like 4 or 5 miles. Yeah, I listened to that. That's a pretty interesting story, and I've been trying to research it and trying to find out, who people that were around that day. And there's only one person I found. He's in his 80s, and one thing he could tell me is he heard about it, but never really thought of anything of it.
It's interesting how, things will happen near where you live, and sometimes it takes years and years before other stories come out from around the same area. I know, and then oftentimes you got to go looking for them. The place where I grew up and had my first sighting, I'm still hearing stories come out of that small area, from other people that saw the same creatures as well. So it's very interesting how that happens. People just keep quiet about what they see.
Yeah. Well, it probably just scares them enough where they don't want to talk about it.
Yeah, that, and I think people, like we did, we found tracks back in 1972, and, when we were kids, and we got laughed at, except by our buddy. We were on our way to a friend's house, and we found these 3 sets of tracks, and we had no idea. We never heard the word Bigfoot or anything. We didn't know anything about this, and it kind of got us wound out, so we ran to our friend John's house, and his dad knew something about it, so he grabbed his 45 and a camera, and he said, boys, take me back to where you saw those, and he took a bunch of pictures, so then he proceeds to explain to us what he knew about this. And as 14-year-olds, you get pretty excited about something like that, the prospect of real monsters being out in the forest, so
Yeah.
we didn't think any, but then I told my parents and sisters. Of course, we were the butt of their jokes for a long time after that. So 2 years later, when I actually ran into 2 of these things, I didn't say anything except to my buddies, and I think a lot of that happens. People are afraid of what other people are going to say about them.
Yeah, I remember on a lot of these stories that you were talking about the 2 that you ran into. I probably would have just fainted, and they probably would have took off with me.
Probably. Yeah, I'm amazed I kept my wits about me. I've always been that way, though. I always think first and then, go through the emotional stuff later. But I didn't want to be on the menu, so I figured that, running was a better option.
Yeah. And Woody and Wes's story, that was a couple of parts in there gave me the chills, and I wasn't stuck around like they did.
Well, we didn't have much of a choice. It's not like we could leave. We could leave.
Yeah.
But I find it interesting that the elders have told you to stay away from them, and they'll stay away from you. Don't bother them.
Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty interesting that they give that advice. There was an encounter back here, and I was telling Will this last week. There was an encounter. Woody ran into the grandson of the guy that owned this farm just east of Vancouver, Washington. And what had happened is he owned many, many acres out there. And I was telling Will this story. It was out, I want to say, in Stevenson. What had happened...
I've heard that same story out there.
Yeah, what had happened is
just north of Stevenson.
Yeah, just north of Stevenson. The grandson was telling Woody that his grandfather had related the story to him, that he was out there working on the farm, and this guy was walking down the road. And back then, they would stop and they would help people. It was uncommon to see someone way out there in the middle of nowhere just walking on the road. And this guy's shirt was all bloodied. He looked like he had just been through a war. He had 2 black eyes. The guy, he actually had 2 broken ribs and a punctured lung. What he had actually told the grandfather, and again, this grandson was relating the story to Woody, was this guy was walking down the road. The grandfather went out and met him, asked him, hey, do you need help? Do you need something? And this is all before 911. What the guy had told the grandfather was a monkey, he said 800 to 900 pound monkey, had actually grabbed him, and they had gotten into a fight, and he'd basically come out on the losing end of the fight. And he said this monkey had beaten him up, and the guy had two broken ribs, punctured lung. I mean, it looked like he just got the crap beat out of him. But what's interesting about the story is that his mention of this 800-pound monkey had grabbed him out of the forest, and they'd gotten into a fight. The grandson was telling Woody that his grandfather wasn't the type to make up stories. His grandfather had actually believed this guy and what had happened to this guy. And it made me think of that story, that the guy that had been pulled off the porch and had been beaten out there, out on your reservation.
Yeah. Wow, that's crazy. Back then, they probably didn't know what it was, but they've seen monkeys before, so probably described as a big monkey.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's how he described it. It's just an 800-pound monkey. He said 800-pound monkey had grabbed him. They got into a fight. The guy ended up on the losing end of the fight.
Yeah, well, the one I seen didn't look like no monkey.
What did it look like to you?
I only got maybe about 2-3 seconds to look at it. I remember I didn't look it in the face. I kind of like maybe just a quick glance, and that was it. And they had, like some of the stories in there, some have full covered face hair, and Some have some. I remember the nose. The nose is about as high as I got. It wasn't, like some of the people say that they have really big noses, and this one wasn't too big. It looked just, well, pretty much like a normal human nose, but, just black and thicker.
Did it appear wider, like a wide nose?
Yeah, sort of, but, I didn't get too long to look at it, but it seemed like it fit his body. Like, I didn't get very long to look at it, because as soon as I seen it, I just remembered, don't look him in the eyes. I was believing Bigfoot my whole life. I just never thought of seeing one ever. Because my grandma and, all the elders said, you play around at night, equal will get you. And that's always what kept us inside at night. And my grandma was told that when she was young. And my uncles, it's just, something that was always told to us. Don't go wandering off in the woods too deep at night, because the eagle will get you.
Yeah, there's quite a few stories. It varies just a little bit from one tribe to the next, but not a whole bunch. I can't remember some of the references right now, but one of them was that they wouldn't hunt. They wouldn't hunt at night, or they could, but they couldn't. They were told to stay out of the valleys at night because that's where these things were.
Yeah.
And of course, a number of them out on the coast, refer to them as man-eaters and some pretty nasty things like that. So.
Yeah, well, like my grandma told me, she told me one time they're protectors of Indians, and I never believed that. They'll hurt anybody.
Yeah, I think they're equal opportunity.
Yeah.
And they have pretty nasty dispositions, that's for sure.
Yeah, when you see them, they don't look like they're going to protect anybody with themselves.
Well, it's like the first two I saw. The third one I saw, the second sighting years later, that was just a quick, it was, near the Washougal River, and it saw my car coming and took off pretty fast. But the first two, that I encountered up close, unlike you, I didn't know, not to look them in the eyes until my buddy Vic years later from Klamath Falls told me don't look them in the eyes. That was the first thing I did was lock eyes with the big one, and it was not a happy look. It looked pissed. I only had a 22, and I shot in the air, just to see if I could scare it off or something, and that's when the other one came around from my right rear. It didn't look any happier than the first one, so I took off.
Yeah.
Has it changed at all after seeing, having your sighting?
Yeah, but I don't really want to admit it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's changed. It's like when I be hunting elk, then you'd be going elk, and if I didn't get them that day, sometimes I just bed down right there and wait till morning and go after them again.
Right.
Or I sleep in my vehicle and till morning and go after them. I don't do that anymore. I used to, when I was 16, 17, I'd grab my backpack, some food, and I'd head up into the trees. Just think around by myself all the time. Now I just don't do that anymore. I always have to have someone with me now. After seeing that, it changed everything. It's always on your mind when you're in the woods now.
Yeah, you're always on high alert.
Yeah, and I carry a couple more guns now.
Yeah, I don't blame you.
You bought a bigger gun.
Yeah.
After seeing them, there's probably not a lot of guns down there that take that thing down in one shot. If you shot it, you better just pump everything you have into it and pray, because I don't even think a health of them could do that.
Yeah, I know that feeling after you see one. That's definitely the, for people who haven't seen one, it's hard to understand that, but after you see one, you I know exactly what you mean. You never feel like the gun you have is big enough.
Yeah. I've seen and heard stories of how fast they move, and you're probably only going to get one shot, and that's it. If you miss, you're screwed.
Yeah.
I think that's exactly right.
Yeah, because the one I seen was a freaking monster, huge. And the tree he was standing by wasn't, that small of a tree, and you look like a little stick compared to him.
Now hunting, you have a pretty good idea of what animals weigh. What do you think that one weighed?
had to been around 8 to 1,000, something like that. I mean, he looked like a huge freaking football player.
You know, I used to hear people say, you know, years ago they estimated the Patterson Sasquatch at 300 pounds, and I think a lot of people don't know how to estimate weights. You know, I grew up on a farm and hunted and helped my dad butcher, and I had a pretty good idea of weights too, and I know the one I saw was at least 800 pounds.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, I'm not a small guy either. I'm 6'1", 280. I can drag it up pretty much by myself. You know, I've lifted weights when I was younger, and I'm not a small guy by any means, but this guy would have tore me up easy.
Yeah.
I mean, his shoulders had been at least 5 feet wide, shoulder to shoulder.
And that's the one thing that I know for us, people always ask me, well, how tall do you think it was? How much do you think it weighed? All this other stuff. But when you see the shoulders, that's the one thing that really caught my attention was the shoulders. I mean,
the shoulders.
Yeah, I just couldn't believe how big the shoulders were on this thing. I mean, and I would say that probably impressed me more than, well, a lot of things impressed me about it, but I would say for a moment I was fixated on how big the shoulders were on this thing. I could not believe how big the shoulders were on this thing.
Yeah. On my way down, when I went up and turned around and I sat there for a couple minutes and just, man, what am I going to do? I don't want to go back down. And finally I just threw it in drive and just, I was doing at least 50 out of there. And there were some pretty sharp corners. And all I could imagine was a big old rock or, you know, half of a tree coming at me. As soon as I hit that spot, I just started getting all weird and woozy feeling. And as soon as I hit that clear cut, I knew I was good. But all I could picture was a big old rock coming through my windshield or something.
Well, like you said, you probably startled it, so it probably left, you know, as soon as you went by.
Yeah, it was more like, it was kind of like a surprise, you know. You know, you surprise someone and they stop real quick and they just freeze for a second.
Right.
That's what it kind of looked like as I surprised them.
Did you say you actually talked to some of the elders and everything on the reservation there about your sighting, or did they not talk about it?
Yeah. And then I had this guy, he heard me talking about it. He goes, oh, you seen the Bigfoot, huh? That's what he called him. That's why I call him Bigfoot.
The Bigfoot? Nice.
Like, yeah, I seen one. He's like, yeah, you'll probably see more. And walked away. Like,
oh, thanks.
Like something I didn't want to hear.
Yeah, there's something to boost your confidence, huh?
He's like, they're all over here. He's like, they're all over here. He's like, don't worry, they won't hurt you unless you, you know, do something to pretty much make them mad, or he's like, just leave them alone, they'll leave you alone, just like a grizzly bear.
Right.
I'd rather play with a grizzly bear than one of those. I don't know, all the elders around here know they're here. My little brother, he was up behind my dad's house in Dixon, Montana. Him, my sister, and my sister's boyfriend were hunting up there. They ran into a herd of elk. What was my brother, you know, he said what was weird about it is the elk were scattered everywhere and just didn't look like they knew where to run. And he figured it was just them coming up through them. So he shot one of the wolves, dropped it, and they drug it down to the road. They were sitting there gutting it out. And my sister's about 6, 7 months pregnant. My brother and her boyfriend were sitting there gutting it out. And all of a sudden, they just heard a bunch of tree breaking and stuff. And my brother said it was like a 60-pound rock. Just come through there and dropped onto the road and rolled off a little bit. My sister was standing there. She just starts puking. My brother's girlfriend was like, what's wrong? What's wrong? And she just like, I knew what that was. And she went back in the truck. And my brother and, well, her boyfriend never even, you know, their family never said anything about him, or he thought it was a rock that rolled off. From what my brother said, this rock was thrown. It never rolled. It was thrown. So they,
something else wanted the elk.
Yeah, well, when I was getting out of it, how my brother said how the elk were, because we went back up there, he showed me the rock and showed me how the elk were, and I think the one that's behind my dad's house right now was hunting them, and my brother and them come around the same time they were getting hunted. That's what is all over the place. Yeah, and, ruined his hunt.
Wynn, forgive me, but there's not a lot of forest out in Montana, is there? It's pretty flat, isn't it?
There is a lot of woods out here, bud.
Is there?
Heavy forest in western Montana.
Boss, I can show you where one pretty much lives.
We're going to come and visit you.
There in September. He's always around, and he pisses me off. I've yelled at him before.
Don't be around when he's throwing rocks.
Yeah, well.
What have you done?
He ruins my hunt all the time. Where I hunt, there's, me and my brothers, we call it our honey hole. Nobody thinks that there'd be elk there. That's where we get our elk every year. Well, we did until, it's been about 2-3 years since we haven't got anything out of there. But now you go in there, it's dead silence. Like, we used to shoot mountain chickens up there and squirrels and everything. And now you don't even see anything up there anymore. The elk moved out.
There's a reason for that.
Yeah. It's where we used to play, One time I had this bull bugle, and I've been chasing him for a couple of years. Quiet some. But I had this bull bugle, and he was coming in. He was about 200 yards away. He was bugling like crazy, just nonstop, and all of a sudden he just shuts up and he runs. I thought it was wolves at first. Man, that hunt's ruined. So I came back the next day, started bugling him again, and he's in a different spot. I got close to him. I started seeing him through the trees, and I bugled, and he did this like a half bugle and just took off running. I'm like, what the hell is going on? I remember somebody told me that he was in there. This guy named Joe that lives in Dixon, he used to say he was up there, and I was yelling at him one day. Like, yelled up, I don't want to say the words, like, damn it, leave me the F alone. And just walked off and never actually hunted up there again.
Well, that's it. They definitely do things like that. They'll, I've got an area that every summer if I go in there I can find, plenty of sign of these things in there. There's no deer. It should be thick as fleas with deer in there, and there's no deer, no sign of them whatsoever. Lots of bear. The bear are scared to death more than usual. They definitely cause some problems with the livestock, or the wildlife in the area.
Yeah. The thing about this one, he's got like I think his territory goes from Dixon to, let's say, Burma, so it's a 14-mile stretch.
Yeah, it's nice and big areas.
Yeah, because, from where my dad lives to Permer Bridge, I was reading a story on the BFRO one. A guy found a footprint right next to the bridge, and that's only 14 miles away from Dixon.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty sure that's his stretch, from there to there. Because the mountain's kind of cut off from right where my dad's house is, and head towards, like, plains and stuff. But I'm thinking that's where, his stretch of the woods is. Timber, this is where he comes, is down on the reservation. On our reservation, we have tons of deer and elk. You can come here and you'll see them all day long. Some people say we're overpopulated. He's in there all the time. He doesn't bother livestock, He doesn't, he or she, whatever, he don't bother ranchers with livestock. I think he's just smarter than that, so nobody goes looking for him or something.
That's probably true. They don't like human contact. Well, Wes and I are definitely going to have to come and visit you. I'm sure I can figure out his range.
What part of Washington are you guys in?
Wes is in Vancouver, and I'm in Northern California.
Oh, you're in California? Yeah, no, Washington's not that far from here. Spokane's only like 2 hours away from here.
Yeah, you're only about an 8-hour drive or so.
Yeah, he's not that far from here. And, yeah, we have plenty of woods around here. I don't know if you've ever seen our Mission Mountains.
No, I've never been to western Montana. I've been to wherever Custer's Last Stand was, and I remember thinking, God, this country is like flat as hell.
Yeah, that's southeastern Montana.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're in the flat stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. We have huge mountains, huge hills, big lake. We have lakes everywhere. And
yeah, western Montana is beautiful.
I think we have the best reservation out of all of them.
That could very well be. Gorgeous country.
Yeah, I think we're the second biggest reservation. We just don't have that casino crap.
Yeah.
That's where all the money's at, man.
Yeah. There's more to life than nothing else, buddy.
Yeah. Oh, that's true. That's true. I can't thank you enough, Wynn, for coming on.
I can definitely take you to some spots in the Mission Mountains where there's Bigfoots.
Oh, I'd love to. I'd love to go. And I appreciate it.
I'll sit in the car while you go look around.
You know, my friends all tell me that whenever I'm in the field, they're hiding, giving me the finger behind my back, so...
Probably. Yeah, I really don't go look for them, but, if I run into them again, I can't stop that, but I just don't really care to see them anymore. There's some big, scary-looking things.
That's funny that you have all these people that, would give anything to go out and see one, but you might regret having that kind of a wish.
That's what that lady on the BFRO, what's her name?
Renee?
Yeah, Renee. I don't know, but I have a bad feeling for her. Like she's gonna see one and it's gonna be bad for her. Don't know why, but every time I watch that show, I'm like, she's gonna run into one and regret it. Because she's such a disbeliever. I always got a feeling that she's gonna get hurt doing that.
Yeah, I guess maybe I'd feel that way towards Renee, but when you see her next to Moneymaker, all of a sudden you kind of love Renee after a while. You're like, and I don't know if it's because you see her next to Moneymaker, or maybe if I saw her in a different light, I may not like her. But
I like her.
I love Renee.
Maybe I like her. I felt nothing against her. It's just, she just needs to open up her eyes a little bit and realize they are out here.
Yeah.
And how they chase them and, all the time. It's just, I don't know. I just feel like it's not going to turn out good for them.
Well, It's kind of silly the way they do that stuff, so.
Personally, I wish I never would have seen one. It's kind of ruined me.
You know what? I can agree with that. I mean, if I would have had the choice, I would have chosen not to encounter them.
Me too. I really wish I wouldn't have seen one.
Yeah, it's weird you guys say that, because I've thought about that too, and I felt the same way. Like, I wish I would have never seen one.
You'd almost rather stay ignorant of it, because it does kind of, like you were saying, and I know, Wes, you're the same as me, too, that, every time we're out in the forest someplace, it's always in the back of your mind. You can't ever totally unwind and just really enjoy the outdoors.
Right.
Because it's always back there.
Yeah, like, I used to go and just hike and sit around, and I wouldn't even care if it got dark, I knew my way out. Now I just like, I got to get out of here before it gets dark.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, Wynn, we sure appreciate being on the show, man.
Yeah, thanks.
We appreciate it very much.
Yeah, even if you just come up here to enjoy the lake, our lake's huge. Just come check out the country. We have a lot of woods and plenty of tall mountains.
That sounds awesome.
To the Glacier Park, there's plenty of them here.
Yeah.
In fact, send me a friend request on Facebook, and I'll send you some pictures to let you see what it's like.
I will, absolutely. Everyone here at Bigfoot Hotspot Radio would like to thank Audible.com. Audible.com is the internet leading provider of audiobooks with over 150,000 different titles to choose from. To download a free audiobook of your choice, go to audibletrial.com/Bigfoot Hotspot.
The guest is Beth. She's in eastern Tennessee and had several encounters.
I will.
Hi there. How are you tonight?
I'm good, but I'm kind of tired tonight. I've been what I call cyber squatching all day, so. Yeah, I'm kind of tired.
Well, Wes is on with us here.
Awesome. Okay.
Hey, Beth, how are you?
Oh, I'm doing great, doing great.
It's good to hear from you.
Yeah, I'm excited about being on the show. I'm a big fan, big fan.
Oh, I appreciate it.
You guys are
appreciate
so
it.
great.
Oh, thank you so much.
I really enjoy the show. You guys are, you're professional, and you seem like genuinely nice guys too. So.
Oh, wow.
Thank
you so much, Beth. That's so nice of you.
Okay, you're welcome.
I think that's the nicest compliment I've gotten from a woman in a long time.
Really? Oh, come on now. Surely not. Surely not. Well, when you're a diehard Bigfoot researcher, and you do have to spend time. You do have to spend a lot of time. Maybe the women will be a little bit more kind to you.
Yeah. You hear that out there, women? Be nicer to me.
Yeah, give the poor guy a break.
Yeah, give me a break. Give me a chance.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, Beth. Well, I guess usually I like to get a little background on what people knew about the subject of Bigfoot before they had an encounter. So prior to the first, and you've had several encounters, that's right. Is that right?
Yeah, I have.
Okay, so before the first time, what did you know about the subject, and then kind of take us into what led up to your encounter?
Okay. All right. Well, I grew up here in East Tennessee. I grew up about 25, 30 miles from Knoxville. That's where I did most of my childhood years, and I didn't know much about the subject of Bigfoot. I was one of 5 children at the time, and the first thing that I ever remember was seeing the Patterson Gym on film when I was a kid, and I was just a kid. I didn't think much of that. I just thought, oh, that's scary, and went on with our playing. We just played all the time in the woods and the fields, the pastures and the creeks. And there was a time when I was growing up, though, that we had a big snow on, and I was one of 5 kids, and we of course we loved to play in the snow, and we were on one of our neighbors' property, and we came upon these huge footprints in the snow, and they had toes. And I remember, us, my brothers and sisters, oh, look at this, I bet that's Bigfoot, But, we came home, we told our parents, they kind of laughed it off, and we just, we never really thought anything else about it. Well, so, I grew up, I joined the Air Force, traveled around a little bit, and just ended up right back here in Tennessee. During the 80s, I had seen a TV program, and I don't know which one it was, that a man had come forward and said that he was the man in the Bigfoot suit, and the Patterson Gym on film. And now I know that's Bob Hieronymus, and, that's been proven, it's been proven plenty of times that cannot be a human being in that suit, in a suit. That Patty is real. She is real. I heard that, and I didn't think anything of Bigfoot during those years. I was just getting my life started, and so I kind of dismissed it. Oh, okay, that's a guy. This guy can afford he was in. The first thing that happened was I had moved to Jefferson County, and I was staying in Jefferson County with my son, and we lived in a little house, and in front of our house, well, actually it was the back of the house, I'm sorry, it faced, there was about 20 feet off of the deck, there was a little bit of yard, and then there was a fence, and right beyond that was a cow pasture. There was a farm, pretty good-sized farm, and off to the left, about, I would say probably 75 yards, there was a little wet weather creek there. And the creek bank, the banks from bank to bank was probably spread around 20 feet, I'd say. It was just a small little stream, Well, one night I was out. This was in April of 2012. I had went out. It was about 10 o'clock at night, and I had walked out on the deck to smoke a cigarette. I don't pay attention to things, when I go, when you just walk out the door, you're not expecting to have something scaring you to death, you walk out the door naturally. Well, I walked out the door, took about 2 steps, and there was something about 20 feet in front of me. There was the tree line and the fence line. There was a tree there, straight in front of me, and something behind that tree roared at me. And, growing up, playing in the woods and, being around cattle and animals, you know what animals sound like and you know what certain animals don't sound like. And this was something I had never heard in my life, never wanted to hear really. It was deep, it was loud, it was aggressive, and it was like an aggressive sounding. And it literally scared me to death. I was terrified. I immediately turned around, ran back in the house, screaming, telling my son, there's something out there, there's something out there. Well, he goes out cautiously, and it's gone. He goes out and checks it out, and it's gone. I get over it. A couple of weeks go by, and I'm like, well, I don't know what that is, but, I doubt it'll happen again. Well, I had recently had a huge neck surgery, and it wasn't unlike me to get up at night. Oftentimes I would get up at night, kind of hurting, and I'd move around, or I'd go outside and, have a cigarette or something, just to move around a little bit. Well, this was about 2 weeks after this thing roared at me from behind this tree. I step outside, and I go and I sit down on the porch, on the deck steps, the very same deck. And the porch light was on behind me. I had turned it on. I was sitting there, and about 30 seconds went by, and I started hearing these footsteps. And they're coming from the left of me, out towards the creek in the cow pasture. I hear something walking up the fence road. And I'm thinking to myself, this was 3:30 in the morning, by the way. It was just, I remember sitting there thinking, what in the world is somebody doing walking up this fence road at 3:30 in the morning? And, all kinds of things are going through my head. Well, I listened to this thing, and it's 2 feet hitting the ground, one step right after another, and they're heavy steps. And I could hear the leaves, and stuff under them crunching. Well, I thought to myself, okay, I'm going to sit here for a second or two and see what's going on here. This thing starts, it continues to walk towards me. And where this creek is, to the left of me, it stepped over this creek without even breaking its stride. And when I realized that, that's when I got alarmed, and I stood up, and I thought, just stand here, see what this is, Well, the light being coming from behind me is illuminating the trees in front of me, and that's about it. Well, I stepped back a couple of steps, and when this thing gets to where it clears the tree, I see what I can describe only as like around 6 inches of the body of it. And it was gray and brown. It was hairy, and it was big. And that I got to that point, and I just couldn't stand there any longer. I just felt vulnerable. It was like, 20 feet away. I was overcome with fear, and I went back in the house.
Would be pretty scary.
Yeah, yes, it was. It, it even bothered me to the point where I asked the man that owned the land. I saw him out in his pasture one day, and I hollered for him to come closer to ask him a question. I said, do you have any animals that I'm not aware of, that could have been in this film? I told him what happened, and he said, no, I don't. And I told him, what I was concerned that it might be, and he just kind of laughed off. And so you know, I told my son and his wife, and, you know, they sort of believed me, but, you know, it bothered me. You know, it bothered me that this happened,
Yeah.
that nobody really believed me, you know.
He didn't have any 100-pound monkeys running around?
No. And you know what? There was about, I guess it was probably a week after I talked to him, his son had a house beside of his farmhouse. And this guy is out, I guess he's doing something with the farm machinery. And he sees me sitting, he looks over and sees me sitting outside. And this guy actually says this, he starts whistling like he's calling a dog. And he said, "Here, monkey, monkey, monkey."
Really?
And, you know, that hurt my, you know, that would kind of hurt my feelings, you know. You know, I came to him with a serious question. And,
Yeah,
you know,
people are cruel sometimes.
Yeah, right, yeah, they are. They can be, that's for sure.
When you heard the thing roaring at you, how far away were you from it? And did it sound like a lion's roar?
No, it didn't sound like a lion's roar. It was a lot bigger, and it was only about 20 to 25 feet from me, and it was standing behind a tree, a pretty good-sized tree, so I couldn't see it. I could not see what was going on. But it was more of an aggressive, really strong, sound.
Oh, I got you.
But, and I didn't stick around to hear anything anymore. You know, I took off and ran in my house.
What did your son say when he went out and looked, when he sent him out, or when he went out and looked?
Well, his wife, she got scared because she could see I was terrified. And he was very cautious when he went outside, I have to say. But he did go out and look around, and whatever it was gone. They took me kind of seriously, if you think about it, how can you take somebody real seriously if you don't know much about the subject yourself, you know?
Yeah. Well, you gave birth to him, I mean.
Yeah, I did.
He can cut you some slack.
Yeah. Well, now, he kind of becomes a believer in my accounts here, so I guess I'll move along 2 years later.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I had moved in with my son and his wife and their little boy last summer. I guess I'll just start with the very next thing that happened. We had been to town, and we got home one evening. It was during the summer. And we got out of their vehicle, and my son walked in the house, and me and my daughter-in-law, Whitney, were behind him. And we were walking up towards the porch. Well, the pasture, this big, beautiful field is off just right off trellis. I mean, I could touch the fence. Got pelted with rocks. She got hit on the leg, and so did I. And one of the rocks landed on top of my shoe. I immediately stopped and looked around, like, hey, what just threw rock? We just got hit with rocks. What in the world, is going on here? Well, they knew that I had been doing some Bigfoot research, so they didn't really say a whole lot about it. I suggested, hey, there's something that could be a Sasquatch throwing rocks at us. The field was grown up a lot during that time of the year, though. The guy that owns the land had not noticed the hay yet. So it was grown up, and there are a few trees around there. So, it's possible. There's nothing else. The fact is there's nothing else in our woods that can pick up rocks and throw rocks. There's not bears down in this area where I'm at. A bear would be highly rare to be spotted to see it. Raccoons can't, cattle can't, squirrels, chipmunks, nothing.
Yeah, pretty much narrows it down.
It does. I mean, it just comes down to the fact of eliminating, different animals that could do this, and there's nothing in our woods here that can do that. Well, I kind of got on alert after that. After, a couple of weeks had went by, and they have 2 dogs, and I have a dog, so we would let the dogs out. Well, I noticed the dogs were kind of acting kind of funny. They would go to a certain spot right at the fence line. There was a lot of weeds that would grow up in the field, and the farmers cut them at the end of the summer for hay. Well, right off of the porch, and for a little ways off to the left of the porch, the weeds had been mashed down. A big area of weeds had been mashed down. Well, the dogs would walk up there and sniff it almost every time I let them out. They would. Well, I thought, that's kind of odd because this guy has not put his cattle in here yet this year in this field. I went up there one day and I put my nose down to the field and smelled. What are they smelling over here? And it smelled like, that area smelled like a horse that had been ridden, really. Has anybody ever said that, they smell like a equine smell?
Sometimes, yes.
Like a sweaty horse? That was what I smelled over there in that area. Well, so they would go and they would, check out different parts of the yard. One evening, it was getting late in the evening. It was almost dark, and my son and his wife were gone. I was there with the baby, and I had to go outside to make a phone call because I didn't get good signal there. So I let the dogs out. Well, they immediately go running up into the side of the yard, up near the graveyard. And there's some trees and quite a few bushes there, and they were barking. They started barking at something. And, it kind of startled me because there was nobody at church. There was no signs of anybody in the field that I could see. Well, all of a sudden, they're standing there barking, and then all 3 of them come flying up on the porch. Just scared. Something scared them. Something really scared them bad. When the dogs come running up on the porch, I'm on the phone, but I'm thinking, oh my goodness, what in the world's over there? And off to the right of me, towards the back of the house, something hits the back of the house. Now, I think that there were at least two of these things, one out where the dogs were barking, and something threw a rock or a stick of something and hit the side of the deck. So the dogs go running in the house, and so did I. So that pretty much, there was a couple other things that went on after that I thought were kind of suspicious. One morning, I had woken up, it was still dark, and my dog was standing at the window growling. And I told him to be quiet because I was trying to wake the baby up. Well, that morning, I get up and I go outside, and my son, under some trees, they had a great big full-size canoe. And he had it sitting up there on a little bank, turned completely over. And this morning, after my dog was down at the window growling, I went outside, and the canoe was laying up on its side. Well, this is a full-size canoe. It has to weigh at least, 500-600 pounds. It's a big one.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was odd. I asked my son, did he do it? And he said no. And I said, well, do you realize something has turned this canoe over? He said, well, yeah, well, maybe it was a wind, He doesn't really want to entertain, the fact that there might be, some Sasquatches around. But, the place where the distance between my first encounters, when the thing growled at me from behind the tree, and the place where he lived, there's only about 10 miles difference in the distance. So it's very possible, they're out there, and they are in East Tennessee. There's quite a few people I've noticed on the BFRO reports on their website that there have been encounters documented and investigated.
So, I mean, what did you, as far as the canoe being tipped over, I mean, at what point do you start thinking it's Sasquatch and not something else? I mean...
The point where I thought it was Sasquatch was when we got hit by rocks.
Yeah, how big were the rocks? How big were the rocks that were being thrown at you?
They were small. They were small gravel, pebble type rocks. Rocks that you might find in the field or on the bank, a bank somewhere, around there. They were rocks, they were little pebble-like rocks, and one of them landed on top of my shoe.
Can I ask you, how did you take the rock throwing behavior? And I ask that meaning, here's the point of my questioning. So I've heard some people say, and I call them flute players. So there's about 20 hate mails I'm sure I'll get here shortly.
We don't care about that hate mail.
No, the rock throwing thing, they'll say it's playful, but I don't take that as playful. I mean, if you're going to throw rocks, if I'm going to throw rocks at someone, I'm not going to take that as playful. You know what I mean?
Right.
I'm going to take that as...
I don't take it.
I mean, how did you take it when you're being hit with rocks? Obviously, they weren't hurting you, but... Right.
I took it, and I still think to this day that is a, hey, get out of my... I'm here, you get away from me. This is my area.
Kind of a way of shooing you out of the area.
Right.
There's a lot to that. It's sort of a way of saying, hey, get out.
Right.
Yeah, I agree.
Especially with little rocks. You wouldn't think that would be... Little rocks aren't quite... They're confrontational, but it's not to the point to where it's going to explode. You know what I mean?
Right. Now, when the rock hit, when the dogs came running up on the porch and the rock hit the side of the house off to my right, I was not facing that area, so I don't really know. There were plenty of rocks on the ground there, and there were branches and stuff, just kind of, they live in a little, there's woods around their house. So, but that was a large rock. That had to be something pretty big. Because of the way it hit, it was loud, and it was thrown with some force. I mean, it scared me. It startled me.
Did you see your dogs wanted to come inside?
Yes, they sure did. Even the cats, there were there's two young cats there. Even the cats come running up on the porch when that was going on.
Do you mind me asking what was going through your mind at that point? Because, when you start to... And I'm sure you're a lot like me, Beth, even though you may not see something, but when you start watching other animals react.
Exactly. Yeah. See, if people will watch their animals will tell them a lot just by their actions. Even birds in trees will make calls that are alarming each other, that there's somebody around, or there's a hunter with a gun, or, animals know. And I watch the animals. I watched them a lot of times go up to that spot and smell that area where the in the field where the grass was smashed down. It was almost like something was going in there and laying, something had been laying there. And actually left a smell behind. So, animals will teach you. Animals will show you a lot.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned birds. I used to hate those damn birds. Every time I go out hunting, they'd sound the alarm. And I'd be like, really? Can you be any more loud while I'm out here trying to hunt a deer?
They knew what you were up to and giving you away.
Yeah, you can hear them from a mile away. Those damn birds would sound the alarm when you're out there hunting.
Here comes the guy with the gun.
Yeah.
One thing that I would like to mention, where I grew up and when we saw the big footprints in the snow, we played up on those ridges all day long, almost every day, swinging on these big vines that were hanging from trees. And we were just rambunctious kids. I was talking to my sister, though, and I said, you know, Missy, the whole time we were growing up, I do not remember seeing one deer or one squirrel in those woods. And, oh, I forgot to mention that my mom heard a scream. Yeah, I forgot about that. This place over in Union County, you know, when I was little growing up. My mom and my dad, like one night, we were all the kids were in bed. They heard something screaming coming from the woods. And my mom said it sounded like a woman being murdered. And they kind of dismissed it. Maybe it was a cat, you know, a bobcat or something. That we never saw bobcats or anything like that. Growing up playing in those woods. And I asked her last week, actually, I said, Mom, that scream that you heard that night you and Dad heard, was that a short scream or was it a long, sustained scream? And she said it was a long, sustained scream. So, you know, that, I wonder about that. I wonder, did they not hear a Sasquatch that night? I wonder why we didn't see, we never saw one deer, and I lived there for 7 years. The only thing I saw in the woods was one grouse. We ran up on a grouse one time, and, you know, you can hardly see grouse, you know, in the woods.
Yeah.
You run up on them and they, you know, they're flat, and that's the only time you see them, you know. So,
yeah.
You know, why were there no deer and squirrel in those trees? I mean, were they afraid? Had they all been eaten up, you know? I mean, it does make me wonder.
Usually the woman screaming, the noise people say that, you know, it sounds like a woman being murdered out in the woods. Usually I'll blow that off as a feline, you know, I mean, bobcat, mountain lion. Except for when it comes from country folk. That's the only time where I kind of raise an eyebrow. Because you know they've heard
all those animals, right?
They've heard that before. And when they say that, hey, I've never heard this before, and this is what it sounds like, that's the only time that I usually give pause and I stop to think, you know what, I don't know. Because like my grandparents used to live out in the woods. We hear coyotes. I've heard the woman screaming in the woods before. And there's a lot of bobcats, mountain lions that'll make that noise. But when you hear someone say that who actually lives out there, and they say, hey, I've never heard this before, I don't know, it kind of makes you raise an eyebrow a little bit. I don't know, what do you think, Will?
It does. Yeah, definitely. I mean, you know, I'm more apt to listen to somebody who lived and spent their whole life in an area or you know, spent a lot of time hunting those animals. You know, when they say it's unlike anything they've heard before, then, yeah, I'm going to pay attention to that because they know what they're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you on that. You know, they grew up in the country, too. My mom's from West Virginia, and my dad's here in East Tennessee, and they had never heard anything like that. And, you know, it just makes me wonder, you know, was that a Sasquatch? It was around about that time when one of our neighbors had a calf that had gotten killed. Something had gotten a hold of his calf. And he came up and told us about it. And, you know, I just think back, you know, could that have been, you know, it's possible. But it's been so good to talk to you guys. I love the show. I do. I really love the show. I was checking out your your Facebook today, and your picture of Todd standing when it morphed, you know, his Bigfoot.
Somebody sent me that. That was pretty funny.
Well, I liked it on Facebook because that was pretty good.
Oh,
you know,
wow.
Maybe he was the 5-year-old that he saw, the 5-year-old Bigfoot that he saw. No, I don't want to talk bad about anybody, really, but I did want to comment on that, though. That was pretty
go
good.
ahead, Beth. Go ahead.
People should check it out.
Do you mind giving your email address out so people can send hate mail your way and stuff our way.
Oh, sure. I'll take the load off you guys. No, I try to be a little bit diplomatic and not say too much about it, but
Yeah.
but I couldn't resist, I just couldn't resist that one.
When you actually have seen one, it changes you in a weird way. I mean, I think back, there's a lot of things that happened to me and Woody when we were hunting prior to our encounter we've never talked about, and we kind of scratched our heads about, like, I wonder what that was. And looking back, there's a lot of things to where, I mean, and I'm first to be kind of critical and not chalk everything up to Sasquatch. I'll usually try and find some other reason or some other explanation besides Sasquatch. But there's a lot of things I can look back now when we were hunting that we scratched our heads on that we have never really talked about. And I think there was a lot of things that happened that because we didn't really believe in Sasquatch, we just kind of rolled our shoulders and chalked it up as, who knows?
Yeah. Yeah, and, it wouldn't be nice to know, each time what really was that. That would be nice to know. But, Will, I've got a question for you, Will.
Sure.
I have not heard your account. I need to buy your book is what I need to do. But I'm just kind of curious, when you saw those two right in front of you, what did they look like? What did their faces look like? I've heard you say, well, what I saw didn't look human like some of these other folks that say they look more human. You said that what you saw was definitely not human.
The faces were, going from the jaw, of course, the head set low into the shoulders, like a gorilla does. So there's, no neck. The head is sitting right squat onto the shoulders. The jaws were very big. I think if, the big one would have opened its mouth, it could have taken off a pretty big chunk of my face if it wanted to do something like that. Mostly covered with hair. It was fairly short, what I could see in the face. Just what was clear was mostly around the eyes and the nose, and the nose was fairly flat. There was a fairly heavy brow ridge. The eyes seemed to be set back in, and it could be just that, that the brow ridge was heavy enough it made the eyes look like they were back in further, but that was the impression I got, and very piercing look. Of course they had the conical head, what you would call a sagittal crest on a gorilla, very much like that.
Really? Wow. What color were the eyes?
They weren't the black like some people say. I would say brown, but it was, like I said, it was starting to get dark, so it was kind of difficult to tell color. But I would have said brown, and not a dark brown.
Did the whites of the eyes show?
A little bit, yeah.
Wow. So they didn't have they didn't have more of a dog-like nose like some people say. These were more of a monkey look to their face.
Yeah, well.
Or were they like you and me, us and them kind of?
Well, it was flatter, not a human type nose. It was our friend Mr. Black. He described it from the photographs that he's seen as if you looked at an Australian or Aborigine type nose.
Yeah,
and I looked at those pictures after he told me that, and I said, well, that's right. That's pretty close to that.
Well, you guys are, in a way, you're, really, well, I think you're really lucky to have seen something like that. But,
in my situation, I wasn't really focusing on a lot of details, because I was pretty scared at the moment, and like I said, with the light conditions weren't great. I mean, I could see fairly well, but I was more concerned with what they were doing and the looks they were giving me. I was kind of focused on the eyes. The eyes were the big thing that I remember seeing the most, and they looked pissed.
I can't say enough about you guys. You guys are great.
Yeah,
we appreciate that.
You've got some class, and there's not a lot of class in the Bigfoot community here lately.
Not too much, no.
Right.
I appreciate it, Beth, and thank you for listening so much, and we appreciate having you on.
We certainly do.
Well, thanks for having me on. It was a pleasure.
Well, I hope everyone enjoyed tonight's show, and come listen to us again next week.
Have a good night, everyone.